Trevor Thiessen. Nice to see you all. I am MLT's Senior Director for Research and Insights. I'll be moderating today's discussion. A couple of colleagues and I will be moderating, keeping an eye on the chat for questions. We'll take questions at the end. We'll share those with our panelists. And if we don't get a chance to answer your question, we'll promise to follow up and try to get you an answer after the session. We will also be closing with a white paper on thawing the frozen middle, so you have all this information for reference, again, to be able to refer to and share with colleagues as and where you see fit. What I'd like to do is give you all who aren't familiar with this a little background in MLT, and then I'll introduce our speakers, and they will get into today's discussion on thawing the frozen middle. So at MLT, we are an organization focused on advancing racial and social justice. We do this primarily by advancing economic equity. We support both individuals and organizations. We work with individuals to elevate their career and economic trajectories, ensuring they go as far as their talent, ambition, and hard work can take them. And we also work with organizations to deploy better, more equitable practices for the benefit of all employees. And after all, as many of you are probably diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals, that is what this work is really all about. I will introduce our panelists today. So our panelists today will be Tina Gilbert and Jennifer Huggins. Tina is the Vice President of Employer Offerings here at MLT. She is responsible for the delivery of client services and development of diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices and insights. Tina brings 10 years of DEI leadership and over 15 years of strategy consulting experience, most notably as a partner at Accenture. Prior to joining MLT, Tina was the first DEI leader for two different organizations, Teva Pharmaceuticals and Accolade. And Jen with two N's, if I'm told, Huggins will be our other presenter today. She is the Senior Director leading MLT's organizational change work. Her career spans over 20 years, leading strategic and operational work in consulting and corporate settings at many leading organizations, including Accenture, Deloitte, Humana, KPMG, and NBC Universal. We are very lucky to have both of these esteemed individuals here to speak about the challenges in DEI today and solutions for how we move forward. So with that, I will step out of the way and let Tina open our discussion today on thawing the frozen middle.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It is great to be here this afternoon. Jennifer and I have been working together for 3+ years. Actually, in the intro, you mentioned both of us at Accenture, but we didn't cross paths until we actually came to MLT. So it's really interesting, all the different pathways that people on my team have taken to get here, but really glad for not only the information and some of the client examples we're going to share today, but overall what we can offer in terms of really helping organizations understand not only the leading practices as established by standards such as our racial equity at work, but what are some of the road bumps, the landmines, and the overall issues that organizations have to face day in and day out as they try to build more equitable processes, get more representation at all levels, and ensure an inclusive environment for all. So the framework for thawing the frozen middle. This is something that we have seen a lot of interest in, especially over the last year, as organizations have moved from creating strategies to now trying to figure out why these elegant strategies that they have documented are not all the time delivering the results. And a lot of them are coming to the reconciliation that it's those middle managers that often are in that crux between wanting to, in essence, motivate and enable their teams, but also needing to ensure that underlining processes systems and technologies are all kind of working together. And so a lot of times this concept of being frozen, being stuck, just trying to kind of manage the day to day is what the middle managers are dealing with, una- unable to, in essence, process all of the great ideas that the leadership has, nor respond to all of the day to day issues and opportunities that the frontline people are sharing. And so this slide just kind of talks to that role of the middle managers, right? There's a lot of power in this role. We all know the concept that people leave their roles or stay based off of the influence of the middle managers. And so when we think about the day-to-day experiences, when we think about the role of hiring managers, people who are involved in promotion decisions, this is in essence a lot of power, and the operations of an organization resides in the hands of the middle managers. But the experience isn't always one of ease and mobility, right? And so where they could have people feeling weighted down by the bureaucracy, both kind of trying to manage down, but also manage up in terms of how they're doing in terms of status, productivity, innovation. Organizations, a lot of times, especially in those entry level managerial positions, have not done a lot in terms of preparing them for people management, preparing them to be able to deal with those day to day issues, and also how to ensure that you're still giving your enough time to think through the more strategic and long term aspirations. And a lot of organizations have middle managers that are just dealing with this with the priority and trying to figure out what is really necessary to do first. How are we managing impact versus effort? And so, what you see in that middle manager experience is a lot of frustrations and a lot of, hey, this is what we've done so far. Let's just keep doing this because there's so much that we're trying to manage. This slide just hones in on the representation at this level. And what it's showing is that middle management is over indexed when we look at the overall representation throughout an organization. And so, just kind of doing what we are doing, there are studies out there that estimate it's going to take over 200 years to get to parity in that middle management. And so, what we're trying to do is think of two types of solutions. One solution that's helping to improve the representation, but another solution that's really there to help those who are currently middle managers be able to effectively guide and lead in these areas so that they can be more productive and more effective in managing the diverse teams that they are seeing throughout their organizations. We've been researching kind of the state of DE&I really for over 20 years, but really the last couple years we have honed in on the experiences of the Chief Diversity Officer. And in our 2023 State of the CDO report, we saw that of of the levels of the organizations that are in essence keeping CDOs up at night is how is DE&I and the role of DE&I translating to front and middle management? How are they understanding all of these initiatives, metrics, scorecards? And really, as you see, only 24% feel that this level is actually even knowledgeable in all of the information, the support, and the resources that the CDO is putting out. So if you kind of think of these three slides, their middle management is a critical role. Middle management is one that is not only least diverse, but has the most impact on the underrepresented talent that organizations do have. And this level is the least informed of the strategies, plans, and initiatives that are being pushed forward. So, what can we do to bring those things together and really provide the attention, the knowledge, and the support that middle management is asking for? And so I'm going to turn it over in a minute and I'll let Jennifer walk you through our framework. But when you think of it, there are really two parts of DE&I. I've kind of talked about it a little bit around the plan, the strategy, not taking away the importance of a rigorous strategy, not taking away that we need to ensure that we are focused on the right root causes and we have the right data that we're using to influence our decision. But we are going to spend the majority of our time today on that organizational change. How does that need to work in conjunction with that rigorous strategy to get the impact on DEI and the outcomes that organizations are looking for? And with that, I'm going to ask Jennifer to come on board and talk to us about the framework.
Great. Thank you, Tina. So we can move to the next slide. Based on MLT's work in this space for over the past 20 years, we've observed a few critical factors that really successfully thaw the ice. And as Tina was sharing on the previous slide, based on this experience and kind of from our experience, unthawing the middle requires this rigorous strategy and this comprehensive organizational change approach. So let's talk a little bit about the strategy. Tina and I, as she mentioned earlier, have both spent a significant amount of our time in management consulting. And in no matter what challenge our clients was facing when we were in that space, whether it was an outdated technology platform, whether it was a merger acquisition, a new strategy, or a product launch, strategic planning played a really critical role in that, right? You look through the data, you do the analysis, right? You understand what is the root cause of the problem that the organization is facing. This same holds true for organizations when they are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. You must do the due diligence and you really must take the time to understand what are the unique challenges that are facing your organization. And it's really important for managers to be actively involved with this. Oftentimes when we're sitting down with our clients, we're definitely meeting with the senior leadership team, but we also need to make sure we're spending time with middle management and understanding those root causes, those symptoms that they're seeing. When we kind of connect with them, oftentimes many people recognize there are problems, they understand, they observe symptoms, and sometimes they act directly from this symptom recognition and they jump into action. And that's often what we see with the random acts of diversity, right? They're being very reactive. They see something and they want to jump and tackle it. And sometimes sometimes they want to ignore it. But what's really important is to have this strategic roadmap that's rooted in the root cause drivers. For example, some of the things that we see with our leaders and helping them understand moving beyond the symptoms is they'll see symptoms around higher turnover with a segment of the population. But what's driving that turnover? Sometimes we see symptoms of longer time in role before you're promoted, right? But what's driving that phenomenon? Another symptom that we often observe that many of our clients have is maybe lower engagement scores with segments of the population. But it's really important to gain a clear understanding about the root causes so you then can develop this rigorous strategy, a roadmap, goals that will help you really move the needle and tackle those challenges. The other thing, and that also helps you avoid that cycle of random acts of diversity where you're just being really reactive. On the other side of this is navigating the organizational change, which is an area that I've spent a lot of time in, and I have a lot of experience and understanding of. So for organizational change, it requires a high touch approach and support, right? You have to help people along the journey. Change is not easy for any of us. Even if we have a lot of experiences, I still sometimes maybe set in my ways, right? So you really have to help people along the journey, and the people that do that are the leaders, and it is the frozen middle, right? So if this segment of your population is not motivated, if they do not understand what needs to change, if they do not want to change, then you have a problem with cascading that to the rest of the remainder of the organization. Organizational change is also about activating networks. It's really important. It is critical to the success of any change initiative that you understand the power and the influence within the organization, and you understand who can drive momentum formally and informally. Organization change also requires that you're delivering a compelling message. You must outline why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, why it's a business imperative, why we're tackling this now. Organizational change also requires you to manage the power and the political dynamics within your organization, and oftentimes now externally as well. The organizational component also recognizes that you cannot do all of this at once, right? And so that's why kind of that cycle and being really reactive, it doesn't really help people help organizations achieve their goal. You have to find the right pace for the entirety of the organization, as well as finding the right pace for your team, for your departments, and prioritize the activities that are really going to drive the maximum value. Organizational change is about managing and mitigating resistance, and it's also about removing roadblocks, measuring, and sustaining this momentum to really achieve your goals. So oftentimes when we're connecting with clients, they may have tried some one-off training, and in our experience, that doesn't truly move them towards their goal alone. Change is a human experience, and for you to really navigate any change successfully, especially DEI, you have to have visible, committed leadership out in front, and successfully helping your organization navigate and move forward. And that is true of not just the senior leaders, but it's also true of the frozen middle. And we really have to mobilize them to action. People want to feel like they're connected to the change, that it has meaning, that they're part of something. And the middle managers are the ones that provide that spark. They sustain it, and they're the ones that help you make the change stick. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the change management framework. Next slide, please. Thank you. Great. So I have used many frameworks in my time in this space, whether it's ProSci or Carter, but MLT has developed a DEI change management framework that's very clear, that's very concise and to the point. So I'm going to walk you through this quickly, and then on the subsequent slides, we'll take a deeper dive into each area. So motivate. To me, this is around motivating the understanding, really explaining the why, explaining the new expectations, and helping people know what it's going to take for us to win and drive DEI forward. The equip phase is around equipping your employees, your senior leaders, your middle managers, your frontline leaders with the skills and tools to operate differently, right? How are we going to rethink this routine? How are we going to implement the winning behaviors, and giving them all the resources they need to do that? Embedding is around reinforcing the skills, right? It's about making sure that we sustain the winning behaviors. It's about evangelizing the positive outcomes. It's around addressing the challenges and the pushback that we are going to receive, right? And then measure and reward is around measuring and sharing the progress and the setbacks, and rewarding the people who are really advancing the cause of DEI within your organization. On the next slide, let's jump into the motivate phase. And so for me, this one is really about this phase is really about helping employees understand what is expected of them and why it's truly important. I like to call this phase preparing the climate for change. One of the things change practitioners do, if you've worked with any in the past, is there's usually like a change readiness assessment. Do people know what's coming? Do they know what the change is going to be? Do they know how it's going to impact their daily activities? Right? Leaders drive a lot of this messaging, right? And so oftentimes, yes, the tone is set from the top always, but the way we cascade messages and changes throughout an organization is that frozen middle, right? So we need middle managers and frontline leaders to really get behind this initiative, and leaders must be out in front, painting a vision of what the future is going to be. One of the things, the kind of missteps that happen is that the senior leaders are all bought in, but you've got to give enough time for the middle managers to really understand how they fit in, where they fit in, what their role is, so they can take that messaging onto their people. So sometimes, we are, quick to kind of flip the switch and move forward, but we really need to make sure that the middle management fully digests the change so they can help cascade it and lead their team successfully. One of the things that people are really eager to understand in this phase is, why is this a priority? What's the benefit? What's going to be different? And what's also going to remain the same? So those are really important aspects of the motivate phase, and things that we observe at MLT around organizations that are navigating this part of the DEI journey is that oftentimes DEI is viewed as a moral issue, a nice to have, an extracurricular. DEI, to stick and to really take root in your organization and to truly be embedded, there's got to be a clear business case, right? There has to be a clear imperative for change, right? It really has to be deemed a priority at all levels, right? Oftentimes, we also see managers have a broad understanding of DEI, but they don't know what it specifically means to them. They don't know how they fit in. They might not understand how they contribute. And so each manager has to have a clear understanding of what is expected from me and practical tips and guidance and support on how they apply things and how they take DEI forward for their teams and department. Managers also are uncomfortable with DEI. Many across the organization may be uncomfortable with the topic, right? So it's really important for managers to be equipped so they can take, again, their teams and departments through this change, right? So they have talking points, so they have coaching and support and guidance and a support system so they can motivate their employees to overcome any resistance or pushback they receive. So on the next slide, we're going to tackle I'm going to talk you through our first quick case. So this quick case will just be a quick summary of how we've seen this motivate presented in our client situation. Next slide, please. So this case is a major financial services organization. This organization was very much, their core values across the organization were grounded in outstanding customer service. Their managers had a great deal of autonomy. They ran their book of business. And they were also very focused on the employee experience because they really felt that if the employees were having a great experience, then their customers would have a great experience. So as we connected with them and partnered with them on their DEI strategy, we really connected that with their core values of the organization, right? So DEI wasn't this separate initiative. It really connected back to who they were as an organization. We held a series of workshops and conversations with the senior executives all the way down through middle managers to really understand their culture, to understand the challenges that they were facing. And then those principles, their DEI principles that we worked on and cultivated, they were really well integrated in a really meaningful way into their talent practices. So it was in employee onboarding, it was in their performance management system, and the presentations and the workshops that go alongside performance season. If you were a new manager, kind of inclusive leadership was baked into that because it was something that was required of you to be a great leader at this organization. In their employee engagement activities, all of this was folded in. DEI was not separate. It was a part of how they practice talent within the organization. And because of this alignment that this organization achieved, they were able to achieve an aggressive 5-year plan. And they're about kind of 3 years on their journey. Next slide, please. So let's move into the next phase, which is around equipping. Engaging, enabling leaders, employees, middle managers with the skills, with the tools they need to implement these winning behaviors, right? This stage is very important to understand who are those people that are influential leaders within the organization, whether it's they hold a big title or role or position, or whether they're whether they're an informal leader that people respect and go to for guidance. Because in this stage of equipping, it's about generating and driving momentum. So we've got the messaging together, we're motivating people, but now we are cascading these messages and we're cascading new ways of working and new ways of thinking and rethinking our routine throughout the organization. This phase is really about mobilizing the change and taking your core messages from Motivate and pushing them across the organization in a very structured and consistent way. Oftentimes in the equip phase, this is where we observe maybe some of the one-off training. And as I think about this, I spent a lot of time with technology implementations early in my career, right? And so it's April 10th, and let's say we're all going through some tech training on a new system that we're going to implement on May 1st. By May 1st, if you don't have any support or refresh, you're going to forget a lot of what we did in our training session today. So one of our kind of pushbacks on one-off training is that organizations must have a way to reinforce, right? What are the other interventions that your organization is going to use to make the learnings in the training stick, right? And MLT coaching is a huge part of our programs for our fellows, but it's really also important for our partners, right? And the employers that we work with. You cannot just talk someone through some items for an hour or a half day or even 8 hours. You've got to reinforce it in a meaningful way to make it stick and to make it manageable. Another thing that we observe oftentimes is that DEI training is maybe framed around avoiding negative actions and behaviors. And we really encourage the partners that we work with to frame around new capabilities, right? This is about leading differently. This is about managing diverse teams, right? And this is D&I, in my opinion, is a leadership skill, right? So how you frame and position the training that you're bringing into your organization is also very important. And the third thing is around systems and processes, right? What are the tools that maybe we're underutilizing that we can use in a meaningful way to reinforce the equitable behaviors, right? We talked about in the first kind of quick case about folding things into your talent practices, right? If you are a new leader or if you are a leader in this organization, period, being an inclusive leader, managing diverse teams, that is a requirement, right? And so that's ways that you kind of reinforce and equip the organization to change. Okay, next slide is going to be our equip quick case. And this is a case study from a major energy company that we worked with. And they were a little guarded with their quantitative information. So we spent a lot of time with qualitative data. We conducted a great amount of interviews, focus groups, because we really wanted to understand the diverse employee experience. We did conduct training with this client. So they really gained a deeper understanding of experiences that were happening in their workplace, and then really help them build up their leadership skills on how they manage diverse teams. But in addition to the training, those managers that went through the course, and this was a course that we did managers and senior leaders, but those managers that went through the course stayed connected in a cohort, and they had coaching circles, right? So not only did they walk away with some learnings for this session, they walked away with a community of colleagues that had had this similar experience and training, and they stayed connected, and we provided additional coaching and support for them, right? So if they had questions, they had an opportunity to pilot some things and test and learn and really apply the skills and the learnings into their leadership styles in a way that felt natural but effective for them to carry forward. And they were really able to grow their teams in a meaningful way. So I'm going to move forward to the next slide. And this is the focus area that's on measure and reward. And so this might be my favorite area. And this is about measuring, sharing the progress and the setbacks, rewarding those people within your organization that are advancing D&I, and then making sure that we're holding people accountable when they're missing the mark. And we are taking the time to understand where is the disconnect. To put it simply, if you don't measure it, it does not matter. And so if there is a lack of measurement and a lack of accountability around diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization, then you are sending a loud message that this is really not that important. Because in every organization I've worked in, we measure everything. Earnings per share, cost of goods sold, you name it, we measure it, right? So if we're going to say diversity, equity, and inclusion is important and we put no measurements about it, I mean, we're sending a very loud signal to the organization, and especially to our middle managers who their performance is managed daily, quarterly, and on a yearly basis, right? So what we observed often in this space is that, again, managers may be very unclear about how they're performing in this space at a macro level and specifically to their teams. So it's really important to give them the information, give them the data, give them a dashboard so they can know I'm here and I'm at point A, and by the end of the next quarter, I want to be at point B. Also, we see limited accountability for DEI outcomes, and we've got to reward the progress. And for those managers that aren't meeting the standards, that needs to be incorporated into their performance management as well as their compensation, right? And then we also don't want to hold managers accountable for overly prescriptive things, right? So I'm not going to hold it against the manager that they didn't do their DEI training. Do I expect them to go? Absolutely. But I also want to hold them accountable for the outcomes, right? I also want to make sure that they're achieving the goals that we've set out around DEI, not just attending the training. So on the next slide, we'll do another quick case around measure and reward. And so this is from a major media company. This organization had a strong belief, much like I do, that what gets measured gets done. And so they made a very large investment in their people analytics. And so leaders were given each quarter dashboards and bonuses tied to their progress towards DEI goals, right? And because they had robust and timely data and tracking, they were able to identify problems and quickly address them. And because of that, they increased their diversity hiring and they decreased their attrition. Okay, so the last and final phase in our DEI change management framework is on the next slide, and it's embed. And this is about reinforcing the winning behaviors. It's about the positive outcomes, sharing the messages. It's around addressing the challenges and pushbacks that you're going to have on an ongoing basis. And we know there's the pushback on DEI is real in the world that we live in today. But with every change initiative I have ever worked on in my entire career, there is also pushback. So this is just a part of the change journey. And embedding is really, this phase is about sustaining the change. This is about rethinking the routine, implementing and sustaining this change in a meaningful way, so you can continue to progress on this journey. And what's really important at this phase too is change leadership, right? Leaders are the most critical part of the journey, right? At the senior level and at the middle manager. And leaders communicate more by what they do than by what they say, right? So it's very important for middle managers to model the behaviors that we're asking them to change. It's also really important at this phase to decorate the troops. So really hold up as a shining example and reward and recognize those leaders that are examples of inclusive leadership, right? It's also important that this can't only just be the work. It's funny, in organizations that are successful in this, they really understand the spirit of DEI doesn't sit in a committee or HR or an ERG, that all hands must be on deck. The middle managers, the frontline leaders, the senior executives, the staff, critical stakeholders, we all must be championing D&I for it really to be successful. Some of the things we observe quickly is managers like implementing the new skills, right? And they do it for a little bit of time, but no one's really measuring it. So it dies down, right? So you must follow up and hold folks accountable. Managers often are worried about trade-offs between productivity and business outcomes. And so in the case, I'll help you understand how you can tie those together. And then oftentimes you'll have incorrect narratives or false assumptions around DEI move around messaging and take roots and spread in your organization. And so that's when you have to stay on message with your core messages that we developed in the motivate phase and really be very proactive on addressing any issues, any resistance, any pushback. On the next slide, we are going to do a quick quick case. And so this case is it was a major consumer goods organization that we worked with. And so they were also interested in diversifying their consumer base as well as their talent practices, right? So their ERG actually helped them with product launches and ad campaigns, and their chief diversity officer ended up being really a chief storyteller in evangelizing the change, which is a really important role for senior leaders and your chief diversity officer, right? So it wasn't that the business outcomes took away from the DEI effort. DEI was helping influence business outcomes, right? So it's really important that people understand the business case and that product leaders know that they can be successful in diverse communities and be successful around their inclusive talent practices. So at this time, Tina, I'm going to pass it back to you so you can take us through a deep dive of a client experience and show how we deliver impact.
We did a little audible while you were presenting some really strong information. And we're going to actually take a little pause here because there was a lot of good questions that came through the chat. So we want to address them now. And in that, we can use some of the examples that I was going to share as part of the answers. So the first one, it was centered on equipping. What are innovative interventions that you have seen that have reinforced and reminded people of the training? You had actually mentioned one as a part of your storytelling of the case example, where one of the interventions was continuing with the learning cohorts afterwards and doing it in a way that MLT was able to provide some additional coaching both to the cohort and some significant examples of one-on-one coaching. And then over time, our individuals were able to back out, and those coaching cohorts and communities were able to kind of stay connected and support each other, not only in DE&I, but overall leadership development, right? I think it was really critical where you said our DEI leadership, DEI is another leadership uh, qualification. Can we have, I know the spotlight is just on me. Can I have both me and Jen? Thank you. The second question is, um, and this is a big one, and I'll give my perspective and then Jen can expand on that. Part of the problem is volume. The number of middle managers is far greater than the board of directors and executives. DEI resources can be limited. How do you overcome that? And the idea that we've been using once again is this idea of cohorts. So it is looking at kind of a team of individuals, kind of your super trainers that we would work with to kind of get on board, to get engaged, to really help understand and invest some of your deeper DEI qualifications. And then those trainers would then, in essence, get another cohort of DEI individuals that they would be responsible for. And depending on the size of the organization, because we had one where we actually thought it needed 3 cycles, there would actually be even one more group of cohort that they would have to eventually cover all of the middle managers and front lines of a large retailer. So the idea of, yes, first of all, it's embracing the fact that all of this training cannot be done just by those who are part of the DEI team, no matter how large your DEI team is. The second is, while it's great to bring in outside, you need to have those individuals within the organization who can be an ongoing resource for people much after training ends. And then the third thing is understanding how technology can play a role in all of this. Jen, you have seen some technology. I don't know if there's some examples you want to share of some of the things we're starting to see that are starting to make a difference in the way people can practice some of these skills.
Yes, thanks, Tina. So yes, I love the question, the earlier question that was even around equipping. So even simple things like office hours, right? So especially if it's a client that we've been at multiple times, we always try to hold space and be available for people to just come and share what's going on. If they've got questions, we try to connect maybe with their ERGs, right? To make sure that we're there. If they've got questions or support, I mean, we're always there virtually, but especially when we, make the effort to travel and be in person with a client, we just try to make ourselves available, not just to the senior executives, but middle managers and leaders across the organization. But from a technology standpoint, one of the things that we've seen one of our clients use, and we actually at MLT are considering partnering, is using AI to practice simulations of, candid or difficult, maybe challenging conversations, right? So coming out of a training, you have your coaching and your support, but now you have an opportunity to truly be in a safe space, right? No one's judging you. It's just, and there's actually lots of research that whether if it was you and I on a session and I was just kind of mocking you, there would be, maybe you would be worried about judgment. But if it's an AI, if it's like an avatar, you know that person isn't real per se, but there actually is someone on the back end who is simulating a conversation. I know Tina and I have practiced in this format with this particular partner, and it's, I mean, every time I go through it, I learn something. I think I'm pretty good in this space, but I mean, there's always an opportunity to learn. And in the simulations, you can purchase, you know, one or two, you know, so people have the opportunity to practice the skills before you're confronted with it in real time. And so they've got DEI simulations, but they've got simulations across many leadership type skills that maybe are oftentimes hard to practice in the workplace until the moment appears. So yeah, there's great opportunities to think just beyond the training and the support mechanisms that really will support the organization going forward.
Here's one as we think about some of the accountability and the measurement. What suggestions do you have for accountability in today's risk adverse environment? Any examples of measurement impacting, any questions about measurements, pause, hitting compensation, pause, etc. So all around accountability and what we've been seeing people do risk adverse, and as it relates to everything from measurement to compensation and other kind of pre-2023 rewards. So I'll just jump in there. So suggestions around accountability, right? Even in these risk adverse times where people are trying to figure out what they can do, what they want to do, and how they will do it. Having ownership is still a primary root cause evaluating need for a DE&I strategy, right? Accountability has to be built in. Now, accountability for what, right? And that's what gets you to the measurements, right? An organization still has the ability to identify those measures that they feel are important to driving business value, whether those metrics are around retention, whether those metrics are around attrition, whether those metrics are around process improvements, those abilities to sit down and think through those goals and linking them to their business outcomes is still a viable and in many cases very necessary um, um, activity. Where the risk averse comes in, right, is not necessarily changing the metric and might be examining how you're measuring that metric, or it might be changing the measurement of that metric so that certain information, whether it is connected directly to an individual's data, or it is now moving from literally kind of counting numbers to understanding sentiment. Those type of things are still kind of at an organization's discretion. What I will say specifically around compensation, and if I'm reading kind of in the lines, you're saying, hey, how are we using achieving diversity goals as either a measurement, a carrot, or a stick associated with your end of year bonus and compensation? Once again, if you have connected those carrots and sticks to specific performance outcomes that you're using to measure business impact, then you can still do that. Now, how far does an organization goes? That is how risk adverse an organization would be. And that's where we get into, we just have to have a conversation with the organization to understand that. Anything you want to add in that one?
I mean, it's funny, back to the carrot and stick, like I have not seen a lot of organizations doing this, but I was like, we celebrate, people who have great community service or doing great things with our who have great client service, or one organization I worked at, the Perfect Service Award, right? But why not use the carrot um and hold up those leaders within the organization that are really driving and advancing the cause of diversity, equity, inclusion, right? And why not attach some financial compensation to that, right? And I would love for it, if it's great if it's expected, but it's even more powerful when it's unexpected, right? And so I just feel like there's a lot of ways to incentivize people to do the right things, right? And then, of course, there are those conversations that need to be had when things aren't moving in the right direction. But I mean, this takes time and effort, but I would love to see more organizations use the carrot like we do around other aspects of business to really incentivize people to do great things.
There were a couple comments and follow-ups. Use of the AI always piques interest, the potential for bias. That's why we actually like this particular software, because it's not 100% dependent on AI. There is a real human that is actually helping and feeding part of the interaction and building some of that anti-bias mindset into, in essence, future programming. So then the natural question has come up, is there the specific name of that software? Jennifer, do you remember the specific name of that one?
We can send it out. We can send some
Yeah.
information out with Trevor.
Yes, we'll send that out. And I think there is another one that someone has mentioned in the chat. Mural has an anonymous feature to ask questions and provides a white space for safe spaces. So I think that's another software. Can you share your thoughts on measurement and goal setting in the current legal landscape? So this is kind of continuing off of that risk adverse space. What type of suggestions do you have on measurement? So Jan, I think you had started on this, right? Starting to think about engagement, inclusion scores. What are things that you can do above and beyond representation?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on like where is the gap, right? So maybe your gap within your organization. I was going to say hiring. Everybody wants to start with hiring, right? But it's often where our clients want to begin, right? So from a recruitment standpoint, but I think it's even better or sometime more meaningful to look at those people like you're on the retention side, right? So look at the advancement, right? Look at it could be something as simple as senior leaders or even middle managers. Do they have maybe a reverse mentor, right? Who are the people that they are cultivating actively across the organization that look different, right? I'd love to see like time and promotion, right? Things like that. So there, I feel like oftentimes we really focus on the recruitment, but as I love to tell clients, if you just focus on the people coming in the door and you are not really focused on those people that sit within your organization, then you end up with this revolving door that you'll never impact your numbers. So I think it's oftentimes really meaningful to start on the retain side and advancing and retaining the talent that organizations have.
Well, Jen, if you don't realize the hour has gone by that quickly.
Time is up.
There's still a couple questions out there. What we will do is provide a written answer along with some of the follow-ups that have come out of some of the questions we did try to address. But as you see, this topic of middle management and this frozen middle is where so many organizations are. And the nuance of the solutions are really requiring a more continuous engagement with them versus a one-off solution. So we love to talk about this. If anyone would like more information, we will provide that. We can come and understand your uniqueness within your organization and help you think of specific solutions for your organization. It's really an exciting time within DE&I, and we're really focused on moving the needle in a meaningful way, despite what we're seeing from backlash in other areas trying to shut us down. So with that, as I said, we will have a lot of information that we will share as a follow-up. Please reach out. We see this as the beginning of a conversation, and we would be excited to talk more with you about your specific organizational needs. Trevor?
Well, I'll say Tina and Jen, thank you so much. I'll speak on behalf of everyone for saying appreciating you coming and sharing your knowledge and bringing a positive solutions-oriented lens, as Tina said, in this particularly trying time for DEI. And thank you everyone who was able to join. As Tina said, we will reach out with more information in the near term. And thank you all so much again for the engagement and the conversation. It means a lot to us for you to spend your lunch hour with us. Thank you, and everyone have a great rest of your day.